You know what's wild? Everyone talks about studying with ADHD like it's some impossible mountain to climb. They'll throw around advice like, just focus harder or eliminate all distractions, which is basically like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off. But here's the thing that nobody wants to admit. The reason most study advice doesn't work for ADHD brains isn't because we're broken or lazy or incapable. It's because the advice itself is designed for brains that work completely differently than ours. I spent years thinking I was just bad at studying, like genuinely convinced that my brain was wired wrong because I couldn't sit still for 3 hours straight, highlighting textbooks like everyone else seemed to do effortlessly. But then I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't failing because I lacked discipline or intelligence. I was failing because I was trying to force a square peg into a round hole. The truth is, ADHD brains are actually incredible at learning when we work with them instead of against them. We just need a completely different approach. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to show you the tiny habits that actually work for ADHD brains, the ones that make studying feel less like torture and more like something you can actually do consistently. But first, let me be clear about something. I'm not here to sugarcoat anything or pretend this is going to be easy. ADHD makes certain things harder, and studying is definitely one of them. What I am here to do is give you practical, realistic strategies that work with your brain instead of fighting it every step of the way. So let's start with the biggest mistake most people make when trying to study with ADHD. They try to go big right out of the gate. You know the drill. January 1st rolls around, and suddenly you're going to study for 4 hours every single day, organize your entire life, and become the most disciplined student who ever lived. How'd that work out? Probably about as well as every other time you tried to completely overhaul your life overnight. The problem isn't your willpower or motivation. The problem is that massive changes require massive amounts of mental energy, and ADHD brains are already working overtime just to function in a world that wasn't designed for us. So instead of trying to become a completely different person, what if we started with changes so small they felt almost silly? This is where micro habits come in, and they're about to become your secret weapon. We're talking about studying for literally 2 minutes at a time, opening one textbook, reading one paragraph, writing one sentence. Sounds too simple to work, right? That's exactly why it does work. Your brain can't resist something that feels this easy, which means you'll actually do it instead of procrastinating for 3 hours and then feeling terrible about yourself. But micro habits are just the beginning. There are specific ways to structure your study environment, manage your attention, and work with your brain's natural patterns that most people never learn about. Let's talk about something called body doubling, because your ADHD brain craves accountability even when it doesn't realize it. You know how you can suddenly become incredibly productive when someone else is around? That's not a coincidence. There's actual science behind this, and you can use it to your advantage even when you're studying alone. Set up a virtual study session with friends, join an online co-working room, or even just FaceTime someone while you both work on different things. Your brain registers that presence, and suddenly focusing becomes way less of a struggle. If you can't find real people, try body doubling videos on YouTube. Sounds weird, but it works because your brain thinks someone's watching, which naturally makes you more likely to stay on task. Now here's where most people mess up the environment piece. They think removing all distractions means sitting in a silent, sterile room with nothing but textbooks. But ADHD brains often need some level of stimulation to function properly. Complete silence can actually be more distracting than helpful because your brain starts looking for stimulation elsewhere. Experiment with background noise that works for you. Some people need brown noise, others need instrumental music, and some actually focus better with a bit of ambient chatter. The key is finding your sweet spot where there's just enough stimulation to keep your brain satisfied, but not so much that it becomes overwhelming. Temperature matters too, and nobody talks about this. If you're too hot or too cold, your ADHD brain will fixate on that discomfort instead of your studies. Keep your space slightly cooler than comfortable because your body temperature will naturally rise as you focus, and overheating kills concentration faster than anything else. Here's another tiny hack that feels almost too simple. Change your physical position every 20 minutes. Stand up, sit on the floor, lean against a wall, whatever. Your ADHD brain craves novelty, And even small changes in position can reset your attention span. It's not about being restless, it's about working with your brain's need for variety. And speaking of variety, let's destroy the myth that you need to study the same subject for hours at a time. ADHD brains actually thrive on switching between different types of tasks. Spend 15 minutes on math, then switch to reading, then maybe some note taking. This isn't being scattered, it's being strategic. Your brain stays engaged because it never gets bored with one thing for too long. The timing piece is huge too. Most study advice assumes everyone's brain works the same way at all hours, but ADHD brains have very specific windows when they're most effective. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that studying with ADHD is suddenly going to become effortless just because you read one script. It's not. Your brain is still going to fight you sometimes. You're still going to have days where nothing works, and you're still going to feel frustrated when other people seem to have it so much easier. But here's what I can promise you. These tiny habits work because they're designed for brains like ours. Micro habits that feel almost too small to matter. Body doubling that tricks your brain into accountability. Environmental tweaks that work with your need for stimulation instead of against it. Position changes that satisfy your brain's craving for novelty. Task switching that keeps you engaged instead of bored. None of this requires you to become a different person or develop superhuman discipline. It just requires you to stop fighting your ADHD brain and start working with it. Because the truth is, you're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not incapable of learning. You just need strategies that actually make sense for how your brain operates. So start with one thing. Pick the smallest habit from everything we talked about and try it for 1 week. Not because it's going to change your life overnight, but because it's going to prove to you that studying with ADHD doesn't have to feel impossible. And once you prove that to yourself, everything else becomes possible too. Your ADHD brain is capable of incredible things. It's time to stop apologizing for it and start using it to your advantage.